Today, our first item is staff recognition upon the retirement of Greg Gopser. John Morin, would you like to say something about Mr. Gopser?
Yes, regretfully, after 2 decades of serving the district, Deputy Harbor Master Greg Gopser will be retiring. That's regretful for us and the public, but it's obviously well-earned and deserved on his part. And we obviously hope the very best for Greg. We do have Jim Merlo, who has worked with Greg Gopser for over 15 years. Would like to say a couple things about Greg. Jim Merlo is the harbor master at Oyster Point and has supervised Greg for over a decade. Jim, can you unmute?
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners and members of the public, and you also, Greg. I just wrote a little something for Greg. He's been a fantastic employee. Greg has been a great asset to San Mateo County Harbor District. In my opinion, Greg is the most accomplished and experienced waterman that has ever been employed by San Mateo County Harbor District. Greg's knowledge of rip currents and open water conditions is unprecedented. Greg was responsible for establishing our water safety community outreach program and has made presentations of this program to multiple schools and community groups during his time here. During Greg's tenure working for San Mateo County Harbor District, Greg has mentored and instructed many new hires and coworkers. He is always willing to educate and assist his coworkers and the public in any task. Greg's vast knowledge of both on and in the water and his experience of facilities workers at both Pillar Point and Oyster Point Marina is invaluable and will be missed. We wish Greg the best in his retirement and much success in all his future endeavors. I mean, I can't say enough about Greg. We're going to miss him. When you work closely with someone for as long as I have with Greg, you learn a lot about him, and just the integrity and the type of man he is something to be respected, and I consider him a friend. So thank you very much, Greg, and good luck.
Would you like to say anything, Greg? Lizzie, can we make sure Greg's unmuted?
Yeah, I've sent him the request to unmute.
Okay.
Greg, did you get the request? Can you say something? Unfortunately, his profile is showing as unmuted.
Okay, he's a shy and not one that boasts for himself. So we sure appreciate everything you've done, Greg, and we understand if maybe you're not that interested in saying anything or having technical difficulties. But thank you again, Greg, on behalf of all the district. Oh, there he is. Okay. Yeah, Greg, we still can't hear you.
So, Greg, it looks like your microphone is probably off on whatever device you're using, but we can see you.
All right. He gave the thumbs up. Thank you again, Greg. All right, let's move on. Thank you.
Actually, I've worked with Greg for a number of years, and it's sad to see him go, but I'm very happy for him and all the endeavors that he's gotten into. He's been an integral part of both harbors that I've seen him over the past over 20 years. I think roughly, 25 years. So, Greg, you'll be missed. There's going to be some difficult shoes and difficult flippers to fill.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, John, and thank you, Jim Merlo. Mr. Gopser, that letter written on your behalf by Harbor Master Jim Merlo is outstanding. It's quite an accolade to be called the most accomplished and experienced waterman that has ever been employed by the Harbor District. Thank you for your service to our agency, and I wish you all the best in your retirement.
I'm going to add one thing. Yes, it is a great accolade, especially when it comes from Jim Merlot, right? Thank you for everything you've done, Greg. Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Great. If there are no other comments, we will now move to public comments and questions. The public may address the Board of Harbor Commissioners for 2 minutes on any item of public interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the San Mateo County Harbor District that is not on the regular agenda. Please wait until the item is, if you wish to address an item that is on the agenda, please wait until that item is in discussion before following the instructions on making a public comment during the discussion item. Melanie, are you ready to share the timer screen with us?
President Reiering, as Melody does that, I just want to do for the record that Commissioner Shane Corrali has joined the meeting.
Thank you.
Can you see the timer?
I do see the timer.
Okay.
So it looks like we're ready, and I see one member of the public with their hand raised, Mr. John Ullum.
Thank you, President Reiring, for allowing me this opportunity to speak. Unfortunately, President Reiring, I'm here to inform you that you've been provided some disinformation by Tom Matoush, and he's using you to spread that disinformation. You're claiming that Mr. Matoush is an ethical hunter, and that it is a lie on the part of people to say that he does not shoot elephants, and you claim that he is not a trophy hunter. Well, I assure you that Tom is a proud killer of an elephant and is in fact a Big 5 game and a Big 7 dangerous 7 trophy hunter. He really enjoys killing animals. Let me tell you some words, Tom's own words, about what he considers ethical hunting. While looking through the trees, Matt said, "That's your elephant, but bad news, it only has one tusk." Tom said, "We only got 28 days left, or a few days left on this 28 done, so I got to shoot that elephant." First, Tom shot the elephant in one shoulder. Then Matt shot it in the other shoulder. And then Tom, he was very brave because everybody else ran. 14 small steps from where Tom stood, he shot that elephant above the eye and dropped it in its tracks. That's Tom Matoush. Another animal that Tom enjoyed killing was a water buffalo. And this is kind of a sad story because Tom got in a hurry and took a sloppy shot. And that poor buffalo had to run 2 miles while it was shedding bone and blood until Tom finally caught up with it. Now, can you imagine the terror, the pain that that animal suffered so that Tom could have fun with it? And here's how Tom describes it. "We were finding a good blood trail with bits of bone occasionally. The buffalo made it about 2 miles before we found it and had our way with it." That is not ethical hunting, Nancy. I'm a hunter. That is not an ethical hunting. Tom likes to shoot.
Mr. Ullum, your time is up. I don't see any other members of the public with their hand raised. We're going to, before we move on to the consent calendar, I'd like to make a change by removing the closed session items. May I have a motion and a second to move closed session items 1 to 5 to a future date? Commissioner Chankrali?
I'll make that motion to move the closed session items to a future date to be determined by the board president and the general manager.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Melanie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Chankrali,
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lorenz.
I'd like to ask a question first. Why are we moving this? No answer. Can you hear me? Hello?
Tom, we hear you loud and clear, Commissioner Lorenz.
Oh, thank you. So there's no answer to the question, why are we wanting to move the closed session?
We have a very packed agenda today, and it would facilitate our meeting to move these to a later date. We have a motion and a second on the table, and so can we have roll call, please, Melanie?
Commissioner Chankrali,
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan, Commissioner Lorenz,
No.
Commissioner Ryring.
Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. So now we're going to the consent calendar, and all the items on the consent will be approved by one motion unless a commissioner requests now that an item be withdrawn or transferred to discussion. I'm going to pull bills and claims, item number 1. Are there any other requests to pull items?
Yes. I would like to pull 4 capital projects and 7.
4 and 7. Great. Any others? No.
No, but I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as it is without items 1 and 7. I think, Ed, is that correct? And number 4?
7.
Yeah, 1, 4, and 7, correct? Those were the ones that were pulled.
Correct.
So I'll move to approve the rest of the consent calendar. Items 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8.
Thank you. I'll second that motion. Roll call, Melanie?
Commissioner Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryring,
Aye.
Commissioner Chankrali.
Aye.
And it looks like Commissioner Brennan just joined us.
So that motion carries. And I'm going to reorder the agenda so that we will hear item number 1 first, then 9, then 8, then 12, then the rest of the discussion items, and consent items 4 and 7 in order after the discussion. So I pulled item number 1. And at our September 16th, 2020 meeting, Commissioner Brennan submitted an email in connection with our discussion of bills and claims. She used it as an opportunity to broadcast complaints from her and from John Olam to the district attorney regarding alleged Brown Act violations. However, Commissioner Brennan misled the board and the public by omitting the DA's findings regarding their complaints. So I'm correcting the record here and asking staff to post the letters that the DA sent to Sabrina and to John Olam. And in the letters, the DA states that he found no Brown Act violations. Jim, can you please attach both letters I'm referring to the September meeting and post under agenda item number 1 today as well?
The request has been noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve item number 1 with my addendum?
I move to approve item number 1 with your amendment or your addendum.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
My hand is raised.
Commissioner Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to point out that those letters were already attached in our last meeting. So that's already been done. But if you want to do it again, by all means, go ahead. And I want to point out that there was a cure and correct, and there was indeed a series of Brown Act violations. So I just want to correct the record. And I think that this sort of pointing out of Brown Act concerns is reflecting poorly on the board president. Thank you.
I'm going to ask our attorney, Tricia Ortiz, to respond to your comment, Commissioner Brennan.
So to respond to what portion of it, that whether or not this.
Commissioner Brennan states that there were indeed Brown violations and there were cure and corrects in place.
So according to the DA, there were no Brown Act violations, and there was no quote unquote cure and correct through the DA. There was we did hold a meeting at which we gave members of the public an opportunity to provide testimony again on the censure of Sabrina Brennan. Wasn't necessarily a cure and correct under the statute, but it did give the public an opportunity to talk about it again. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Lorenas.
Let me make sure I understand. You chose to take this consent item first, and the two consent items I pulled last. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, well, this is a nice example of using the board presidency for her own ends.
Actually, Commissioner, this is bills and claims, and it's one of the most important items of business that the Harbor District needs to get done every meeting. So that's why I pulled it, and that's why I put it first.
And you're using it to pick on another commissioner for no cause. Sorry, but it's a political move on your part, and it's on its face.
Well, Commissioner Lorenas, that is your opinion, and I'm actually reporting this out so that the public understands that the commission, in fact, did not have any Brown Act violations. I'm not doing it to pick on a commissioner. I'm doing it to report the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Brennan.
Yeah, in response to your comments and also Tricia's comments, I just wanted to reaffirm that there was a cure and correct, that there was a series of Brown Act problems, and the DA has said that those problems have since been corrected, and I hope that that will continue to be the case. The whole purpose of having the DA review Brown Act concerns is to make sure that the board is acting in accordance with the Brown Act. There were a number of problems, including our board president, Nancy Waring, refusing to let the public comment their full 2 minutes. I don't want to relitigate the whole thing, but it was a very shameful and sad moment for this district. The Brown Act concerns that happened were completely avoidable, but unfortunately the board president was on a power trip, and so things had to get fixed, and the only way to do it was to go talk to the DA. So fortunately, I think some of those problems have improved. I hope that that continues.
We have a member of the public, Mr. Ullem, who would like to speak.
Thank you, President Waring. As you know, I sent you those letters from the district attorney. And in that letter, it is true that after multiple weeks of investigation, they concluded that you had barely but technically had complied with the acts regarding the law regarding disclosing what you're talking about in closed session. I note that you had to spend a lot of attorney time to make that happen. And I suspect you'll never release the cost of doing that. Ms. Waring, you were the one who cut me off in the middle of a talk when I was just trying to describe some of the accomplishments that Sabrina Brennan had occurred over her career at the Harbor District. You chose to have a staff member cut me off. I complained about it to your lawyer. I complained about it to the district attorney. And lo and behold, after spending $600 on a letter that it cost me, I can tell you, I don't have $600 to waste on this kind of crap. You then decided you would rehold the meeting and allow people to speak who you had cut off at the previous meeting. You can pretend that was not a cure and correct, Ms. Raring, and it is your style. You are very much like the president. You frame things in a way that make no sense and only suit your personal outlook on things, which explains how you reordered this agenda completely so you could score a few points to the one person who is seeing this meeting, which is me. Because you moved the meeting to so early in their day, there isn't a single other person here to see you have your little fit. And that's you, Miss Raring. And that's what we're fighting against. Do not vote for Tom Matoush. Do not vote for Virginia Chain Corrali. Thank you.
Commissioner Chain Corrali.
So I know that this is a topic of a lot of commotion as usual, but I want to thank you, Nancy, for straightening the record. I think transparency is important. We've been, we've been fooled by a lot of people, including members of the public, spreading lies and everything during the campaign season. So please stop grandstanding if you're doing so, which I have just heard that this is happening with my own ears. And with that, Nancy, I'm going to call for the question because this is bills and claims and it's business that needs to be done. So I'm calling for the question.
Great.
So we need to vote on calling for the question.
Melanie, roll call.
Mr. Brennan?
I'm sorry, I'm having a problem locating Commissioner Brennan.
I'm right here. You didn't unmute me, but thank you for finally unmuting me. I'm voting to call for the question.
Mr. Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Raring?
Aye.
Commissioner Chain Corrali?
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush?
Aye.
Great. So do I have a motion and a second to approve item number 1?
Well, we have a motion. I made the motion. And I think I
And
can't remember.
Tom seconded.
Seconded. Okay.
Okay. All right. And then roll call, Melanie.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Raring?
Aye.
Commissioner Chain Corrali?
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
The motion carries. And we'll now move to reorder discussion item number 9. And the rules that we've been having for our Zoom meetings will continue. I'll poll each commissioner in random order for each matter. Commissioners have 2 minutes to discuss agenda items and a minute for follow-up. Discussion item number 9, Surfers Beach Restoration Pilot Project. John, this is your item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a motion to approve an increase in capital expenditure appropriations of $137,900 to cover anticipated additional engineering and planning costs for the Surfers Beach Restoration Pilot Project and required eelgrass mitigation efforts at Pillar Point Harbor. The Surfers Beach Restoration Pilot Project has been underway for over 5 years. The goal is to remove sediment, which is built up inside the Pillar Point Harbor outer breakwater, and move it to Surfers Beach for beneficial reuse. In addition to addressing coastal erosion and public access issues at Surfers Beach, this project would also address the impacts to vessel navigation and anchoring associated with the shoaling that has occurred inside the harbor since the outer breakwater was constructed. Consultant Brad Damitz, who's been leading the project, is with us today to provide a brief project update presentation and explain the need for additional soft cost monies. Can we unmute Brad? And allow him to share his,
there we go.
Share his screen as well.
Okay. Good evening. Can everybody see me?
Hi, Brad.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, or good afternoon, commissioners. Not used to the adjustment yet. So as John mentioned, my presentation today, and by the way, let me share my screen first. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay, thank you. My presentation today is focused on the eelgrass mitigation portion of the Surfers Beach project, which I will explain. I've given some brief updates over the times, but I'll get into a little bit more detail today. And I won't be talking much at all about the Surfers Beach pilot project itself and the history leading up to that. I know you guys have a full agenda today, so I'll keep it short and sweet. And I appreciate you guys for squeezing me in. So real quickly, here's an image. You can see Pillar Point Harbor over here, Surfers Beach over here on the right. The issue we're talking about and the purpose for the project is to take some of the sediment that has shoaled up inside of the east basin of Pillar Point Harbor and then place it over on Surfers Beach, about 75,000 cubic yards, put it in an overbuilt berm and create new beach habitat on Surfers Beach, where that sand would have been in the first place had the East Breakwater not been there. So, project planning was moving forward and moving along pretty well. You can see here that ESA has created some permit level design plans for the project. The striped areas were the proposed dredging area. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And the dotted area is where the sand would be placed. So we vetted these through a technical advisory group made up of agency representatives and other experts, came up with this preferred alternative that you can see here. At the time, there were known eelgrass beds, which you can see also in this image. However, since then, we've done additional eelgrass surveys as required by permit agencies. And this next slide here is going to show you the results of those surveys. Okay. So as you can see, in this area over here, where the proposed dredging area is, there's a pretty large eelgrass bed, as well as other areas in the harbor. One of the things that popped up recently is over here by the boat launch ramp, there's a small patch of eelgrass that's become established. So it seems like the trend is in the past 5-6 years, it has become established and has spread. This eelgrass survey was done last November, and it came up with about mapping of 5,700 square meters of eelgrass throughout the harbor, most of it in the east, a little bit over in the west side of the harbor. So at that time, when we discovered the eelgrass, we had asked the engineers from ESA, Louis White and Bob Battaglio, to conduct some analyses, look at if we could do this Surfers Beach project in light of knowing that there's eelgrass there. And what we determined was it's not worth moving forward with that project. You cannot get enough sand to do a Surfers Beach project by avoiding the eelgrass. And that means that we would have to do the required mitigation. But on top of just not being able to do the pilot project, any other dredging in this East Basin, including the boat launch ramp, is going to become increasingly hard unless we do this eelgrass mitigation project. So at that point, we decided to move forward with eelgrass mitigation plan. And just pull it here. This plan, there's a link in the staff report to this mitigation and management plan. And it was prepared by Marine Taxonomic Services as a subcontract under my contract. And also ESA at that time subcontracted us out some work, including a harbor-wide bathymetry survey to support this effort. What this is a comprehensive plan to mitigate for that eelgrass from Surfers Beach, and not just for the Surfers Beach pilot project, but also for future dredging needs over there. So the idea is we mitigate for the whole amount of eelgrass at this time, and that even if it does expand after we mitigate for it, we can still get in there and do any kind of dredging because we would have a 10-year permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So the report itself is based on a number of scientific evaluations, bathymetry surveys, some modeling, and eelgrass surveys to determine where the best place is to transplant that eelgrass. It includes not only the plan for where it will go, but also how do you do that harvesting and transplanting, and how do you do the monitoring as required by the permitting agencies. So I'll show you an image in the next slide, but the conceptual design right now is to construct basically a large platform at -1 mean lower water depth, which was determined to be the best depth for the growth of eelgrass, and create that at the West Breakwater, where we don't have dredging needs, where we don't have a lot of human use, anchorage, that kind of thing. So the eelgrass that's within the proposed dredging footprint would be transplanted over to the West Basin on top of this platform after it has a chance to settle. And the remaining eelgrass that's still in the East Basin, even though the plan is to mitigate for that, we would leave that to remain in place as a what's called a reference site, so we can monitor. So if the new eelgrass beds don't take, but we also notice there's a trend that the other eelgrass is dying off in the East Harbor, we know that it's probably some other cause for that. And the other advantage of that is if the eelgrass that we transplant initially doesn't take, we would still have sort of a seed stock that we can transplant over for a second try. So the conceptual design and everything that's in this plan is just conceptual, and it requires additional engineering plans, so actual construction plans of how that dredging and filling will be done. And that's one of the proposals here today from ESA to create these plans. So this image here will show you kind of the overall concept. This is the East Breakwater. It's a large area. The areas in blue would be cut or excavated and placed in the deeper areas in brown. But in addition to the cut from the site itself, we'd have to import approximately 7,000 cubic yards of sediment from somewhere else. Right now, the proposal is to use the boat launch ramp for that. Since there's already a dredging need, we kind of could be a win-win situation, because we would have this site where we could place that material and not have to worry about all the permits and issues that come with either disposing it off-site or placing it on the beach. And in the future, we could expand that as necessary to create a larger area. So as I mentioned, in addition to the rest of the mitigation components, there's also a proposed monitoring program. You have to do that for up to 5 years as required by the state and federal policies protecting eelgrass. Not going to get into these details, but it's in the plan. I just show this photo here because it shows some impacts to the eelgrass beds in the East Harbor during the low tide. Got a lot of clamming activity, and it just gets torn up. And in my mind, it's just not the right place to have healthy eelgrass beds, just because of all the human use and the anchoring and stuff that goes on. But most importantly, the need to dredge this area. So it's more appropriate to place it in another part of the harbor that doesn't get the same amount of human use and doesn't have the same maintenance dredging needs. So, as far as hard costs for the project, Surfers Beach project itself, and under that umbrella, I consider the eelgrass mitigation part of that. So the project construction, the engineer's estimate that we had most recently is about $2.4 million to do that, to pump the sand over to the Surfers Beach and create that berm. And then physical and biological monitoring for several years after the project, as well as during the project. Cost TBD, we're working on that now and trying to get some funding to cover that. And then the eelgrass mitigation costs, which I'll get into in just a second. Okay, so eelgrass mitigation costs. We have the soft costs, which we're coming to you today, proposing with several different elements. One of them is the engineering and design. So there's two things that are being proposed today by ESA. One of them is to backfill the out-of-scope work that they've already done to address the eelgrass and kind of look at the alternatives before we move forward with the plan. And then the second part is to actually do the engineering and design for the eelgrass project itself. And so that's $93,000 to do the design plans and a lot of, some analysis of how to best construct this. The second part of this is $4,000. That's to Marine Taxonomic Services. It's a biological consulting group that did the plan. We need to keep them involved as the engineering plans are being developed. And then the third thing is most likely we're going to be required to do sediment sampling and analysis to support the permitting of this project. These are all not to exceed costs. Hard costs, construction, it's a big big project, as you can see. There's going to be some costs associated with that. I don't know what that's going to be, but as part of the engineering proposal, they're going to come up with an engineer's estimate. I can tell you it'll likely be in the hundreds of thousands for that, just because of the amount of sand being moved. The transplanting of the eelgrass, we have a better idea of the cost there because there's a market rate of $8 per square meter. So we're talking about $200K for that. And then the monitoring for 5 years, about $40,000. And those are the hard costs for eelgrass mitigation. As far as overall project funding, just as far as updating you on that, we do have an $800,000 grant by Division of Boating and Waterways. And that is, we're requesting an extension on that, which I think we're going to be getting soon. And then in the district's budget as working capital, there's $1.2 million in the 5-year budget for construction, plus another $500,000 for eelgrass mitigation. We've got a bunch of other things in the hopper, hoping to hear back some good news on some other potential funding sources. So we've got some money for planning for Surfers Beach and a Prop 1 grant that we haven't heard back from that was applied for in July. So hopefully we hear back positive news on that soon. The second one, we submitted a letter of interest for $800,000 construction funding from Ocean Protection Council. That was August 28th. We've been invited back to do a full proposal. So I've got my fingers crossed on that one. Hopefully that comes through. And then several other smaller efforts, like the NOAA Effects of Sea Level Rise grant application in partnership with Caltrans and some other agencies and partners to pay for the monitoring of the project. And then also continuing to seek financial contributions from Caltrans and others that would benefit from the project. And next steps. So, the planning work, we need to complete the CEQA process and the required studies and surveys for Surfers Beach, and a couple things for the Eelgrass portion of that project as well. Prepare the final engineering plans, technical specs, and cost estimate for both projects, which this proposal here today would cover. Also, a little bit of sediment sampling and analysis, most of which has been done, but we need to do some for the Eelgrass mitigation project, and then the permit applications. And at that point, we would come back to the board and request to put this project, the Eelgrass project, out to bid. Then just prepare the bid documents, and then select the contractors and be able to construct that mitigation. The best time to do it is in the earlier part of the growing season. So the growing season in Northern California is I think it's April 1st through October 31st. So if we can get it done late spring, early summer, it would be ideal to even do it in advance of Surfers Beach project. So that's kind of the nutshell overview of the Eelgrass mitigation project and where we're at with Surfers Beach.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any questions by commissioners or the public?
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. So do we have, let's see, this item, let me pull this up on my screen.
Commissioner Lorenz has raised his hands.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Brian. So Brian, you mentioned that if we go through this mitigation process, that it will give us a 10-year permit buffer for moving sand around. Is that right? Could you expand on that a tad?
Right. So as part of the Surfers Beach project, the permitting with the Army Corps, instead of just doing an individual permit for the project itself, we're applying for what's called a regional general permit, which would cover all of the maintenance dredging in that part of the harbor, including boat launch ramp, Surfers Beach pilot project, and any other larger Surfers Beach project or maintenance dredging that needs to happen. That permit would be for 10 years, but the good thing about it is once you get that foothold, you can renew it. So it's almost like it's in perpetuity. Even if the eelgrass continues to grow, we've mitigated for the amount of eelgrass that kind of snapshot in time when we did it.
So to me, this is consistent with the concept of having a sediment management plan within the harbor. And
yeah,
maybe that's something our board could take up at a later date. Thank you. Great work, by the way.
Thanks, Ed.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I just wanted to share my appreciation, and you do a great job of keeping us in the loop and keeping the public updated. This is a challenging project, and it's keeps changing, and I really appreciate your consistency and flexibility and following this through. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you guys for your support of the project as well.
Thank you, Brad. Always appreciate your presentations. Do I have a motion to approve these additional capital expenditures?
Yes, I would like to make the motion. First of all, Brad, thank you so much for the update in your report. And John, thanks for your work on this. I would like to make a motion to approve the increase in the capital expenditure appropriations of $137,900 to cover the anticipated engineering and planning costs of the Surfers Beach Restoration Pilot Project and the required eelgrass mitigation efforts at Pillar Point Harbor.
Great, thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Brennan?
Yeah, I will second that motion. And I'd just like to point out that since we've been having Zoom meetings, I haven't been able to make motions because I'm constantly muted. And when I raise my hand, I'm not called on. So just wanted to point that out, but happy to second the motion.
Melanie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Ryring?
Aye.
Commissioner Chang Crawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you again, Brad.
Thank you very much. Look forward to updating you guys and giving you some good news at the next one.
Great. See you again before long, I'm sure.
Yep.
All right, now we're moving to item number 8 on the discussion temporary tent coverings for outside dining areas.
No, we've approved that. That was on the consent calendar, right?
Let me check.
Yes, that was approved.
That was approved.
Oh, it did get approved. Okay, great.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but.
No, that's great. Thanks. All right, item number 12. Under discussion, employee leave consideration due to COVID-19 pandemic. Approve revision to policy 6.5.11. Julie, this is your item.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This item is being presented to you this afternoon for consideration of providing an additional 80 hours of leave to essential workers, which would include OE3 represented employees and the district harbor masters. It also updates the leave policy during a pandemic to incorporate a provision of state law AB 1867, which was recently signed, which allows the use of leave hours if an employee is prohibited from working by the district due to concerns related to the potential transmission of COVID-19, in addition to the 3 previous requirements. Currently, there are about 10 district employees who have used all or part of their emergency sick leave hours over the last 7 months. This extra leave is anticipated to provide an extra incentive for employees to stay home if they are experiencing COVID symptoms, and hopefully this will limit the transmission of COVID cases. It also provides essential employees to not have their current leave balances affected by COVID-19 related illnesses, or in the example, the instructions by supervisors to remain at home due to fear of transmission. Staff recommends approval of the revised policy. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions, or Commissioner Chang-Crowley?
Thank you. To start the discussion, I'm happy to make the motion to approve the revision to 6.5.11 on the leave policy during pandemic. And yeah, and to include the revision and to include up to 80 additional emergency paid sick leave hours for employees who are members of OE3 and harbor masters, and to incorporate the new eligibility provision for first responders as required by law.
Great, thank you. And I think I heard Commissioner Matoush come in with a second.
Oh, I didn't hear that, but.
Commissioner Matoush, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. If there are no questions, Melanie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Chang-Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryring?
Aye. The motion carries, and we'll move on to item number 10. This is a Finance Committee report from September 2020 regarding analysis of building or leasing, admin building, and a request for direction on funding options for the building. Mr. Pruitt, could you present this report, please?
Would be happy to do so. Earlier this year, with the passage of the budget and the capital improvement program, the construction of the administrative building was placed on hold based on the priorities of the district at that time. After the budget was passed and the CIP program was reevaluated again by staff, and we were looking at ways to, if we can save money even further, and looking at the rents that we pay for the our commercial space to house the district. We looked at, is it possible to save money by constructing the new building and stopping those rent payments? We brought that topic to the board to see if the board concurred with reevaluating that, and the board then sent that a question back to the Finance Committee for review. The Finance Committee did meet and May 4th, no, I can't remember the date, I apologize, did meet and look at the cost of continuing to lease our current office spaces as compared to building a new office building. And secondly, if we do decide to build the new office building, should we use current funding that's in our that we have in our accounts, or get a loan to cover the cost of building a new building. After looking at it and reviewing it, the numbers all came out. The board found, or the committee found, that the district would save money in the long run by building a new office building and stopping the payment of lease payments to the current owner of our office spaces. There's both options, both taking a loan out to build the building and build with current capital budget were considered. Both options do save the district money. And we came up with, the committee came up with two different recommendations for the board to consider as a whole. One was to approve the issuance of the design and engineering and project management request for proposals for a new administrative building, and update the district's request for proposals for a new administrative building, or update the district's capital project plan to include funding of the project, project from available working capital. Option two, approve issuance of design and engineering project management request for proposals for a new administrative building and update the district's capital project plan to include funding of the project from the issuance of debt. And both myself and Julie are standing by to ask if the committee has any further questions or if there are any questions posed.
Great. Thank you, Jim. We have a member of the public with their hand raised, John Ullum.
Thank you, President Waring. First off, I'd like to remind everybody that's watching that when Sabrina Brennan became part of the Harbor Commission, office space was being rented over at a Class A building in South San Francisco. That building was costing you twice as much to rent as the building you have currently now. When she asked about that, she was mocked by the former manager, Peter Grinnell, who said it would take something like $50,000 or something like that, some ridiculous number to physically do the move. It cost $7,000. And as you've seen, it's paid off quite well. So anyways, part of the credit for the good financial position that you're all in today is due to Sabrina Brennan's ability to take crap from guys who wanted to keep things where they were and getting them to see that they could get a lot nicer place for half the price right here on the coast side. Question for Mr. Pruitt. This looks like you've done some analysis of the cost of what it would cost to buy a building versus rent a building, and you've come to the conclusion that it will cost less to buy. Can you show me any analysis, or have you done any analysis? When will the break-even point be? When will, how many years from now, if we were to pay projected rent versus pay projected payments, would the line cross and we would now start winning the game, so to speak? So there must have been some sort of break-even analysis done for something like this. Can you tell me how many years before buying a new building would save the district money in relation to renting a building that they're renting now? Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Brennan, you have your hand raised.
Unmuting. Yeah, thanks. So I don't remember exactly when. It was several months ago. I asked Julie to come up with a new spreadsheet that breaks down, the savings for the district. And I believe that was attached to a board meeting packet, or attached, I should say, to our website. Jim, could you republish that document, or is that document going to be available for this meeting so that the public can reference the information?
We can publish that spreadsheet, yes.
Okay, great. So that'll be published just for the public's knowledge. If they go to the district's website, they look for the agenda for the meeting for October 21st. You'll see also a link below that, which will take you to Julie's document where she does the math on the savings to the district to build a building versus continuing to rent. And Julie, I really appreciate you putting that information together and making it available to the board and to the public. And then the question I have for you, Jim, is what are the next steps? When is this going to be back on the agenda to look at approving costs and whatnot? So what's the plan?
The next step would, if the board approves, either option would be to reissue the request for proposal for design, engineering, and permitting for the building. And then once we get responses to those RFPs, the board or the staff will evaluate those RFPs and then bring back a recommendation to the board to approve.
Can we, since we've already done this once before and some current board majority members put the whole thing on ice, can we revisit the proposals we already got? I don't even remember who responded, or like, can we reach back out to those companies to make sure they're aware that we're doing a new RFP process, or what's your plan to do outreach and proposals?
We'll do Commissioner Brennan, we'll do the standard issuances of the RFPs and notices, but we will definitely review our records and let the companies know that they've already submitted responses to the previous RFP, and those responses are expired now, that we're redoing it and they have an opportunity to resubmit.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, am I live?
Loud and clear, Commissioner Mateusz.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up part of the spreadsheet that Julie prepared. Had a 30-year analysis, and were we to own our own building at the end of 30 years would be $1.2 million ahead. And at the end of 30 years, it's not just the cost savings. We'd be sitting on an asset that would probably be worth north of $4 million as opposed to just plain renting. For those reasons, I support building our own building, and I'd like to make a motion that we use district capital and fund this thing ourselves and start this project as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I'll second that. I'll second that motion.
Okay. Commissioner Lorenz?
Thank you. While I'm pleased that we're moving ahead with this for all the reasons stated, when we get to my pulled agenda items, we can talk a little bit more about this, but I think it's also important to realize that while saving money for the district is absolutely an important consideration, we should also consider the public safety, and I'm referring especially to the Bullet Point Harbor Johnson Pier reconfiguration, which at this point is off our budget. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the pulled agenda item at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Jen Crawley, your hand is up. No?
Sorry, I forgot to lower it.
Oh, okay. All right. I think we have a motion and a second on the table. So roll call.
President Ryring, if I could, I just want to make sure that we have the motion that Commissioner Mateusz is making clear, and that the second was on that clear motion. And it was the recommendation of the staff, and based on what Commissioner Mateusz said, was to approve the issuance of design and engineering project management requests for proposals for a new administrative building and update the district's capital project plan to include funding of the proposed project from available working capital.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. It was option number one that the motion was made for, and the second. And we have a motion and a second on the table, and Melanie was just about to do roll call, but Commissioner Brennan, I see your hand is up.
Unmuting. Yeah. I just want to clarify that this is the second time we have voted on this. So I hope that this time it sticks. A lot of work was done by staff to move this forward with an RFP previously, only to have it waylaid, or I don't know how else to explain it, to have 3 commissioners put it on ice. And I hope that we don't do that again, because we are just going in circles here. It'd be great to see the district move forward instead of all of the bickering and lack of productivity. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, I actually think we've been getting an awful lot of work done this year during COVID. And yeah, some things have had to take a back seat because we've had very full agendas, but I'm glad we're able to revisit this now. And we do have the motion and the second on the table. And Melanie,
I'm not having a discussion with you, Commissioner Waring. I just made a statement.
Same with me. So Melanie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryring,
Aye.
Commissioner Jan Crawley.
Aye.
Great, the motion carries. Discussion item number 11 is the Oyster Point Marina Joint Liaison Standing Committee Report for September 2020. Mr. Pruitt, can you please present this report?
I can, President Ryring. As required by the 2018 MOU between South San Francisco and the Harbor District, a joint liaison standing committee meeting was held on September 28th of this year. See, it was an action-packed agenda with several different briefs provided of significance. The Kilroy Oyster Point development is moving forward and will be beginning work immediately adjacent to the Oyster Point Marina as early as January. And we've been communicating, and there's been a few public meetings with the tenants of Oyster Point, letting them know the plans and how it will affect them. The city of South San Francisco got funding and is commissioned a study for expanded Oyster Point ferry service, which could include significant upgrades to the spit. And the spit is the area at Oyster Point Marina where the current harbor master's office is, access to dock number 7, and access to dock number 8, also known as the guest dock, with significant possible buildings and a new harbor master's office. The old single-walled fueling system at Oyster Point Marina is being removed as we speak, if it's not already done. They started that contract a few weeks ago. Several capital improvement projects have been recently completed or are scheduled to be completed at the marina, to include the replacements for docks 12, 13, and 14. We received responses to that RFP recently, and we'll be bringing that to the board. Replacement of the entrance markers and their associated structures. The same as we've received, again, responses from the RFP on that, and we'll be bringing that to the board. Electrical upgrades for all docks have been completed. Most recently, the replacement of the main electrical panel on dock number 14, which can be reused in the new construction of dock 14. Replacement of all deck boards on docks 12, 13, and 14, which will make the dock safe until we can get those replaced. Also, part of the meeting was the presentation from myself and the city manager of Oyster Point, a joint report on the operations at Oyster Point Marina. The district has met or exceeded all performance measurement goals as outlined in the 2018 agreement. Part of the package that I provided, or that's provided with this committee report, is the agenda with all attachments and presentations provided at the Oyster Point Marina liaison meeting between the city and the district. And I can address any questions or the committee has, or any other commissioner.
Thank you, Jim, for that report and for all your work on behalf of this effort. I don't see commissioner hands raised yet, but I see a member of the public, John Ullum.
Thank you, President Raring. I'd like to speak to the bit about the fuel system being torn out over at Oyster Point. As most people probably don't know, that system, that's the current cost to taxpayers for removing that fuel system is around $370,000. But that does not include any potential cleanup from leaks or anything like that. That money was, expense was foisted onto taxpayers by Virginia Chain-Corrali, Tom Mateusz, and officials in South San Francisco. What happened was there was a Communist Party-owned state developer that had development rights to Oyster Point. And the docks were their responsibility. The fuel system was their responsibility. I should say the fuel system, the fuel dock, and everything like that was their responsibility. And your former manager found out and discovered that that company had not been honoring its obligations. So he threatened to actually make it impossible for them to lease out any of their units or transfer the development rights unless they met those obligations. Tom Matoush and Virginia Chain Corrali on August 2nd, 2017, at a liaison committee meeting, voted to help South San Francisco foist those expenses onto taxpayers of San Mateo County and of South San Francisco. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why they treated taxpayers that way and why they decided that they preferred to subsidize the development and the sweetheart deal that this development company had so that they could then sell that package to another development company, Kilroy, which now has it. So taxpayers of South San Francisco and taxpayers of San Mateo County were basically screwed by Tom Matoush and Virginia Chain Corrali.
Commissioner Matoush. I see your hand up.
So basically, Mr. Ullum is spinning a tale. He's very good at that. But the city is removing the fuel system at their cost. The district is not paying anything for its removal. There was an agreement drawn up between the South San Francisco and the Harbor District and Oyster Point Marina by Hanson and Bridget. And the details of that are spelled out very precisely. John, I'd appreciate it if you could stick to fact.
Thank you, Commissioner Matoush. Commissioner Brennan?
Thanks for unmuting me. Just to follow up on what Commissioner Matoush just said, and then I'll get to my comment. As far as the fuel system goes, the city of South San Francisco should be more than removing the system, which is doesn't meet current safety standards. It should have been removed decades ago. It's great that they're finally coming up with the funds to remove this leaky system. But in addition to that, they should be replacing the system because it's their responsibility to make sure that boat owners at Oyster Point have access to fuel. So it's not enough to just remove the system. South City also needs to replace the system. And that's not something that the taxpayers of San Mateo County should be burdened with. This is a system that specifically benefits people that are using Oyster Point Marina. And I'd like to remind everyone that that is a city-owned marina. Thank you. The second thing is, I wanted to make sure that the public and the full board has an opportunity to experience the presentations that the committee experienced during your daytime meeting. Sadly, we're still going to be having, or I shouldn't say still, we're going to continue to have daytime meetings for our regular board meetings now. So it's not really helping with the transparency problem. But I do think that at a regular board meeting, it would be appropriate to get a presentation similar to the one that was held at the Oyster Point Liaison Committee meeting. Specifically, the public ought to have a chance to ask questions. Things were discussed about changes to the Bay Trail, which affects public access to the Bay. There was no discussion about improving launch opportunities for human-powered vessels. Very few questions were asked at all during the presentations by the people present at the committee meeting. The public was denied an opportunity to learn about the project and to ask questions about the project. And it's a big project, and it's an exciting project. So I think that it's important that this get on our next agenda. That's a suggestion. Thank you.
Commissioner Lorenz.
Excuse me. I would just like to highlight one of the points Commissioner Brennan made. At this meeting, it was clear that there was very little public serving facilities coming from all the development at Oyster Point Marina. In fact, one member of the public, I think there may have been 2 or 3 total members of the public at this daytime meeting, pointed out that, and actually asked the question. So these amendments to the Bay Trail and to the buildings that are there, will the public be able to access them? And the answer to that question was probably not. The Bay Trail, yes, but not all the other amenities that were being discussed. They also showed a aerial photograph of the development, and it was super clear from that photograph that the vast majority of the improvements are going to be for the private development and not for the public. And so it would be very useful for our constituencies to see this and ask questions.
Go ahead.
Great. I would just like to say that the relationship between South San Francisco and the Harbor District is one of teamwork. And we will be working as a team. We will continue to work as a team to involve the public and to find solutions and to find additional funding sources when necessary. Commissioner Brennan.
I was waiting to be unmuted, so sorry about the delay. I appreciate Commissioner Raring's remarks about teamwork, but I want to remind everybody that we are elected to serve the public. We are not on Team South San Francisco. We are here to advocate for the public's best interest and for the district's best interest. And while, of course, we want to work collaboratively and productively with other agencies, we need to make sure that we ourselves and also the public have a very clear understanding about projects that impact the people who use our facilities. And so that is what I'm asking for. I'm asking for transparency and a simple agenda item that would allow the public to better understand the project, which I'm sure the developer wouldn't be opposed to. They have a nice presentation. So why not share it with the public and allow the public to ask questions, and also allow the full board to ask questions so that we all get a clearer picture of what the project's going to be like. It's pretty simple. Thanks.
Commissioner Lorenz.
Well, I'll have to say that I agree with Commissioner Brennan. She stole my thunder. I absolutely agree that it's fine that we have a collaborative relationship with South San Francisco. Very happy to see that. But our job is to take care of our constituents and the public. And I would like again to ask for this presentation to be given at one of our meetings. Thanks.
So it looks like this committee report was just background and discussion. So we will now move on to hold consent items. If I'm doing this, if I'm out of order here, please somebody let me know. But capital update, monthly capital projects update from Mr. John Morin. John?
Good afternoon again, commissioners. Every month we do supply a capital improvement project update of all of our current and proposed board approved capital improvement projects. Commissioner Lorenas, did you have one in particular that you would like me to give an update on, or would you like me to go down all of them?
Am I unmuted yet?
Loud and clear, Commissioner Lorenas.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for asking, John. Yeah, I wasn't expecting for you to run through the entire list. There were just a few things that I felt were important to point out and not actually have on the consent. First of all, I'd like to just say that the two items that I'm going to talk about really should not have been put on the consent agenda. Our work's not completed just because we provide information online and have it accessible through a maze of clicks to get to it, if the public even knows that it's there. We're also here to inform and discuss the topics and to help the public understand their value in a greater context, and that's what I'd like to do for these projects. So John, the first one is related to the Johnson Pier renovation. Hang on, let me find my notes on this. We're pulling the renovation of the pier expansion and the fuel dock, and it just simply states because of the CIPs are slowed due to COVID-19 national emergency. So the design, engineering, and permitting are not on the budget. And so my question is, this is an important project for us because we are currently being sued by several fishermen for aspects related to pier renovation and infrastructure, and then also just for the general safety of the public. And so I'd like to just know a little bit more about the financial reasons for that statement. And then I also believe that this should come to the board again. We shouldn't just postpone it without board approval. So John?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it was my understanding that through our process through the board's process of actually prioritizing capital improvement projects with the uncertainty of of our future revenue generation due to COVID-19 challenges and the other prioritized projects that at present the Johnson Pier H-Dock, fuel dock renovations have been on hold until we can, as we're continuing to do, work with our grant consultant to try to find additional funding. I guess the general manager may speak more to his thoughts on, I guess, when we will be moving forward. In addition, I guess we also do have the concern about the ongoing litigation, which is not actually with fishermen as much as it is the two of the fish buyers' tenants, and that's an active challenge we're trying to work our way through, which may actually end up mandating some actions that we have to bring to the board for approval.
Right.
Commissioner Lorena, if I could add to that.
Yes, thank you.
So back when the district was reviewing the budget and the capital improvement program, the district had a workshop and discussed it and got public input on given the available funding that we did have, what projects took priority. And Johnson Pier did have a strong showing for priority from the public, and the board itself has voiced strong support for the Johnson Pier program in the past. And I concur with that 100%. However, given the cost of the Johnson Pier expansion project being in excess of $14.5 million, the district simply didn't have the funding unless they wanted to side or push off all other capital improvement projects and complete only the Johnson Pier expansion, which included the H and fuel dock. And it was decided at that point that we would prioritize the capital improvement of the projects within the plan, and the Johnson Pier, based on cost alone at that time, would have to, it's not canceled, it's still a top priority. It's just on hold right now until funding can be identified. We're aggressively pursuing grants at this time, and at the mid-year review of the budget, we may be able to identify additional funding that we can put towards it, or at next year's review of the plan, we can also look at it again, see if funding is available to move that project forward. It is at the top of our priority list to do so once funding gets identified.
Thank you very much for time to hear, and I would have preferred that this. Am I unmuted? I've got my screen flashing. I'm not muted.
You're loud and clear.
Okay, good. This is exactly what I would have preferred to see in the discussion agenda. And it's great to have you give that rundown to folks. Thank you.
I see a hand raised. Commissioner Brennan, unmute yourself.
Just to be clear, I don't control the mute here, you do. But anyway, so speaking to that, I'm glad that we're looking for grants. We've been looking for grants for this for years. Hasn't happened yet, but I hope that it does eventually. I think if we have all of the engineering designed, it'll be much easier to get grant funding. And what happened when the board approved the current budget that excluded the renovation of Johnson Pier is we basically prevented ourselves from doing the work needed to attain grant funding. So that was disappointing. Both Commissioner Lorenas and I voted against the budget, and we did that for only one reason. And the reason was because this project, the renovation of Johnson Pier, which would alleviate many legal concerns, was stripped from the budget. So I'm very disappointed that it's not in the budget, and that was a board decision. That wasn't a staff decision. So it seems like we're not clearly communicating that today. So I just wanted to clarify that. I wholeheartedly support the renovation of Johnson Pier ASAP and have voted in support of that consistently and have voted against budgets that don't include it, primarily our last budget. It's been misrepresented that I voted against the budget related to another project. That is factually untrue. I support the West Shoreline Trail project completely, and I support the renovation of Johnson Pier completely, and always have, and has always been consistent on these two projects, which I've been advocating for years. Thank you.
John Olam, do you have a comment?
Thank you, President Waring. I would describe Johnson Pier as being the central feature of Pillar Point Harbor. Yet you do not have the money to maintain and repair and replace the one most important piece of infrastructure at the harbor. And there's a reason for that. It's because you subsidize the operations of South San Francisco to the tune of $2 million per year. You refuse to make it clear to people that the Harbor District is an enterprise district, that it's supposed to make money on the investments it makes with the people's tax dollars. Yet you continue to throw it down the hole at South San Francisco, which has never even come close to breaking even for the amount of money that you put into it that you got back. And then when you finally got the opportunity to cash in on the deal, which was to get some of the revenue from the leases of the development, Tom Mateusz and Virginia Chan-Corrali gave away that too. That's just the way it is. If you were to get your act together and act like a management company, that's what you are over in South San Francisco, and make them pay for their infrastructure, there would be no problem with funding the infrastructure that is now crumbling and inadequate in Pillar Point Harbor, or at Pillar Point Harbor. For God's sake, you can't even fund the fueling system that's antiquated. Go look at that fuel system. But you're going to go dump money into some docks over in South San Francisco that are being designed for 60-foot yachts, which I can't afford. I don't have any friends that can afford a 60-foot yacht. I don't know anybody that can afford a 60-foot yacht. But that's who you want to spend that money on, is build those docks instead of servicing the needs of the fishermen who make a living feeding families on the coastside. And that's you, Nancy Raring.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for that opinion. Commissioner Mateusz.
I'd like to remind the public that we continue to look for grants on a regular basis. We've applied for grants in the past to rebuild the entire Johnson Pier complex. We've gone to extreme ends for a number of years, and we continue to look at those things. And anybody that's paid attention to the history of South San Francisco and Oyster Point Marina will see the fallacies in Mr. Ullum's statements.
Thank you, Commissioner Mateusz. Commissioner Brennan?
Just got unmuted. So I just wanted to point out that what the member of the public said, Mr. Ullum, is accurate, completely accurate, actually. And I think that we should thank him for paying attention to this problem and for bringing it to the public's attention, because it's the public's money that's being spent here. And we have a responsibility to spend the countywide taxpayers' property tax money in a thoughtful way. So I do think we need to give some consideration to what he said. And unfortunately, it appears that the board president is feeling personally attacked for whatever reason. The response to public comment is not to be a smartass. So please don't treat the public with disrespect.
We have some grandstanding going on here today. I think we're finished with this agenda item, and we'll move on to the next consent calendar item that was pulled by Commissioner Lorenz. This is receive the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, San Francisco Bay Region 2, notice of filing, notice of opportunity for public comment, and notice of public hearing with attachments on amendment to the Water Quality Control Plan, San Francisco Bay Basin, and draft substitute environmental document to establish a bacteria, TMD, and implementation plan for Pillar Point Harbor, Venice Beach, and update bacteria objectives for protecting water contact recreation in the basin. Mr. Pruitt, this is your agenda item.
President Reiring, Commissioner Lorraine has pulled this. So if possible, I'd like to hear his comments first, and then I can proceed if that's okay.
Commissioner Lorenz, Lizzie, you can unmute.
So this, first of all, we were not done with the previous item. There's plenty more there. I'd like to go back to that. And secondly, muting commissioners like this makes it really hard to have a fluid meeting. I wouldn't have to be saying, please go back, if you would just keep me unmuted so I can say I'm not done yet. I realize that that's not an easy thing for you to do, relinquish control, but please consider it. So can we go back to the item 4, please?
If you want to make a comment.
Just to respond to what Commissioner Lorena said, we are following proper parliamentary procedure here, and every commissioner had more than 2 opportunities to comment, and it was time to move on. Would you like to move on to this agenda item since you pulled it?
Let me repeat myself because maybe I just wasn't clear. I pulled a consent agenda item 4. Now, I would like to go through agenda item 4. We covered only a portion of it. Did you misunderstand me?
I think I do, and we've moved on to agenda item number 7.
So I'd just like to be clear, not just for myself, but for the public that's paying attention. So what you're saying is that when I pull an item such as the report by John Morin, I'm only allowed 2 minutes to discuss all of the items. Is that what you're saying?
We're not keeping strict time on the commissioners. We are kind of going round robin. I'm calling on any commissioner that raises their hand, and they're being allowed ample opportunity to speak and to ask questions.
Well, I beg to differ. Because you say it so does not make it so. You've allowed me to discuss only 1 item. There are more items on the report that I'd like to discuss, and that's my prerogative. It's not yours.
Mr. Lorenas, I moved on because I didn't see your hand raised and I thought you were finished. If I was mistaken, please do go ahead and ask additional questions about item number 4.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. We were just having a little bit of a misunderstanding. Okay. So the next, excuse me, the next item I wanted to discuss is the West Trail project. Excuse me. John has done a very nice job of laying out the timing, the kind of the history of it, and then highlighting the most important aspect at the very end, which is permitting is near completion and 95% plans are complete. And I have one question first, and that is, if possible, John, could you give an idea of when construction will start on this, just ballpark?
Yes, Commissioner Lorenas. The board approved after the project update on November 20th that we move forward with putting out the invitation for bid. Once all of the plans were complete and the permitting was such that the project construction could occur, an invitation, after the invitation for bid proposal winner was approved by the board, that we could issue a notice to proceed. So at present, we're just waiting on the final project permitting to get to a point where, in fact, we can put the project to bid. And after we do put the project to bid, month and a half after that, roughly, we would be able to select the winning proposer and bring it back to the board for approval at the next regularly scheduled meeting. And shortly thereafter, we would be able to issue and mobilization could begin. So at present, I cannot define any better. We are regretfully waiting on our permitting to get to a point to where it's realistic that we can put the project to bid. All of the permitting agencies, like us, have been slowed to some degree due to the COVID-19 challenges. But I would anticipate within the next few months, the permitting getting to a point where we're confident that we can put the invitation for bid out to the public for bid.
Very good, understood. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I'd like to point out just a few little details on this project because there's been a little bit of misrepresentation of how this all came to play. So in your report, and again, thank you for having such a detailed report here. The board approved in 2018, or actually maybe it was 17. I think it was 17. I didn't vote for it, and neither did Commissioner Brennan, to put a retaining wall there. And it went back to the Coastal Commission, and Coastal Commission sent it back to us. We met again, and we hired ESA to help out with this. And in your report, the project consultants, which was GHD and ESA, they provided a project update in April 17, 2019. I'd just like to point out that the misrepresentation that this was a project that was approved by our commissioners is not exactly representing the sequence of events, but it's all laid out right here for everyone to see. So thank you, John. Okay. So now we can move on to the next item. I was going to ask about the dredging of the launch ramp, but Brad took care of that for me. And I'd just like to point out again that the fact that we now have permits, we'll be able to work with our dredging companies to dredge when we need it. One more question for you is hang on a second, I need to find my way through this. Yes, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So the reason I pull this is because this report by the Regional Water Quality Control Board is very important for us, but it's also important for the public. It lays out their review of what's happening in our watershed. Now, as all of you know, anyone who's been paying attention to the Harbor District knows that the Harbor District waters at Pillar Point have been on say, Heal the Bay's beach bummer list for years. Surfrider's Lab has been testing the water for 20 years, and we've found almost exclusively that pollution in our harbor goes up and down, and it's consistent. So the reason it's important for the public to know that this report was published by the Regional Water Quality Control Board is that they're offering the public and us an opportunity to weigh in on their interpretations of the results that they have and also on what needs to be done. So to the public, I say, go to the consent agenda in our regular meeting and find the Regional Water Quality Control Board. You'll have to do some clicking, have a look at it, and there's a date there that will give you an opportunity to weigh in. The closing for written comments is 5 p.m. December 1. So this is a reason why things like this should not be on the consent agenda. They should be on the discussion agenda so that we can bring context to the public. Thank you. I think that's my last one.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yes. Can you hear me? So I want to thank Commissioner Lorenas for pulling this item and highlighting some of these important projects and studies that are going on. I want to follow up on the Water Board's report. I would really like to have a meeting, a public meeting, where we are able to go over the findings in that report and give feedback. I would have hoped that that would have been on this agenda for a report. Is it possible to get a report from staff on what's contained in that report? So that's a question for Jim.
Commissioner, my intent was to work with the RCD over the next 4 weeks or so and develop a staff report and draft comments for your consideration at the November 18th board meeting. This report was published, the notice was published on 13 October 2020, not giving us enough time to do a full analysis of the report and give a staff report for this meeting.
And what's the deadline for comments again?
Deadline for comments is December 1st, 2020, with a public meeting on February 10th, 2021. Okay,
so that means at our next board meeting, this will be agendized with suggested comments from staff. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, as outlined in the staff report submitting this report, that was our intent.
Okay, great. Would it be possible to do some sort of like a workshop or something where we have somebody from the water board talk with us about the report so that we're able to ask questions about it and getting some direct feedback? I know that they're very busy people and spread thin. So I don't know what their availability might be, but with Zoom, it might be possible. Have you spoken with them directly?
I've spoken to them directly, making sure that the district was on their notification and email listings so we can stay up to date on what they're doing and what they're recommending. And they have been extremely open to receiving any feedback or comments that the district or RCD has provided.
Do you think they'd be willing to be in on the next meeting so we could ask questions or get some more info from them?
I haven't asked, and I can't give any opinion if they're going to be willing or not.
Is that something you could ask them to do?
We can look into it for the next meeting, yes.
Okay, I just bring this up because it's so important that we solve the water pollution problems at Pillar Point Harbor. And my understanding is that this study looks at that. To have the state water board looking into the pollution problems with runoff in our area of the coast side, and with all of the deep concerns that the public has about the water quality and the water pollution at Pillar Point Harbor. In particular, we have children that swim in the harbor and at great risk. And we've had reports of people who have gotten quite ill from contaminated water at Pillar Point Harbor. So I just think this is really an urgency item. And I think there's a lot of frustration on the part of the public as to why these water quality issues haven't been resolved by now. And I know it's complicated, but the more we can understand and partner with other agencies that are responsible for making sure that, water quality be improved, the better. And so I think if we could open up some communication with them, I think working in a silo has not been in the best interest of the district or the public. And so the more we can get these agencies talking amongst themselves and the public asking questions and the public understanding the process, the better. So it's, just a suggestion that we have someone from the water board for that item. Thank you.
Commissioner Brennan, thank you for your comments, and Commissioner Loredas also thank you for your comments. With respect to the report and what the district's done over the years, and working with RCD for multiple years, the district, through the leadership of the board and the direction of the board, has accomplished a lot with respect to water quality in the harbor. The district has cleaned and replaced damaged stormwater pipes. Most recently, we cleaned the Capistrano stormwater pipe that is underneath the parking lot in front of Tenant Row. That is now nice and clean, as provided with that manhole or person access cover that we put in that allowed that for that. We provide free mobile pump out for vessels in the inner and outer harbor for sewage to prevent the dumping of sewage in our harbor. We provide a free pump out station in the harbor for people who want to take their boats over to that pump out station at any time. Working with the RCD and other agencies, there's been a strong push for pick up after your pet campaigns. We place doggy bag dispensers throughout the harbor. We sealed a drain behind Tenant Row that used to lead directly to the stormwater system, which greatly improved the water quality there. We improved our operations to prevent and reduce runoff from the pier and the docks. We actually, when we rinse off our docks, and through the great work of our harbor master, we shop vac the docks and rinse it, so large particles don't go down into the harbor. They get cleaned up and disposed of properly. And that was an idea that Chris Tibby came up with, that he knew about and implemented. So that was a great idea to reduce that. We continue that we dye tested our sewage systems, and we didn't identify any leakages in our sewage system throughout the harbor. We also conducted extensive water testing along with several of our partners that Commissioner Lorenas mentioned. One of the things the report does point out, the contamination in the harbor was not widespread throughout the entire harbor. It was more site specific. The fecal contamination was not, or from humans, was rarely detected. Liverboards, but were found not to be a source of the pollutant in the harbor through testing. The major source of pollutants were deer, dogs, wildlife that were coming in through the creek and through the stormwater systems into Pillar Point Harbor, outside the control of the harbor district. But with RCD, we've worked and we've been working hand in hand with our partners to try to address those issues as best we can to reduce those contamination. Most recently, as published today by the weekly beach and creek water sample results from San Mateo County, no beaches within Pillar Point Harbor are posted as exceeding as of the October 19th sampling. I have to dig into a little bit more on what that means, but that's a good thing that Pillar Point Harbor is not listed on this week's testing cycle as being contaminated at those harbors. Bottom line for us at Pillar Point Harbor, with respect and concerns that I have with the report that I'll be reporting out to the board in full and in more detail, is one, the report treats Pillar Point Harbor as one source and as one body of water when there's multiple feeding stormwater outfalls in areas which drain into different stormwater outfalls into the harbor, each with their own source of bacteria that come out through that, be it deer, cattle, or other wildlife. So I don't think the harbor necessarily needs to be treated as one entity instead of several different beaches. The district is being held responsible for pollution that originates upland from the harbor. And the district is being directed to take measures that are unrelated to those sources of pollution upland from the harbor itself. The is also being directed to, per the staff report, to conduct very expensive and expansive testing and monitoring for pollution that is not originating in the harbor itself. So we'll be going to those issues, working with our partners as identified in those reports, and most significantly using our relationship and our working partnership with RCD to facilitate much of that.
Thank you very much, Jim. Really appreciate that information. Commissioner Mateusz?
I just want to also point out that we've invested $300,000 over the next few years of looking at our water quality and issues, and we're partnering with different groups. So it's important to say that we're not operating in a silo. We're working with the community, and we're doing what we can with others.
Thank you, Commissioner Mateusz. Commissioner Lorenz, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Jim, you did a great job once again. I really appreciate the long explanation of what the district has done partnering with RCD. It's been an absolutely great collaboration, and there's no question that we've made a lot of progress. And I was happy that I pulled this just to hear that. I also have a few comments. If it's possible, it would be great to just have a workshop before we have to send in our comments. I completely agree with you that there's some issues with the report that need to be adjusted based on our perspective. And I think the Regional Water Quality Control Board would very much appreciate that. But not only that, it gives us a chance to put a little leverage on some of the organizations that should be helping us solve these problems, because the report does point upstream of the watershed and expects us to do something about it. The RCD's done a great job working with us on, just so that the public knows, one example is they mapped out all the plumbing, not just the plumbing in our Harbor District land, but in all the plumbing that goes in the watershed that goes into Pillar Point Harbor. That was the beginning of our better understanding of how our harbor gets polluted. Now, Surfrider has a water quality testing lab, and it just happened to be my turn to go out and test some of the waters in our harbor. We do that once a week. And we test the pipe that comes out, it's a storm drain that comes out at Capistrano. Those of you that have been looking at water quality over the years know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the beach by the, what would that be? That would be the northeastern side of our harbor, or where our recreational tenants are, on the outside of the inner breakwater by the fish trap. The pipe that comes out of there, when tested, is often in the bacterial counts are 1,000-fold higher than what the AB 411, the bill that requires the Environmental Health Department to post signs, consistently 1,000 times higher. When I tested it last week, it was 8,000. The cutoff point is 104. So clearly that's not coming from our harbor, but we need to work with all of the different agencies that can help solve this problem. So it'd be great if we could maybe have a little workshop before we do the comments and just invite the public and notice it such that any commissioner who's interested can go to the meeting and also have a say. We've done that in the past, so I know it can be done. Once again, thanks, Jim.
I'm just going to say that I sent a photo of the warning sign at the outfall of the west end of Capistrano Beach to the county to let them know that the signage is inadequate, needs to be replaced by a larger and a legible sign that will warn visitors of the outflow pollution danger. And yeah, it's not big enough and it's been graffitied over and it's not legible. So anyway, thank you for that report, Jim. That was really, really helpful. Commissioner Brennan?
Yes, I appreciate the report as well. And I do recognize that the district has been taking steps and spending a considerable amount of money to try to understand the water pollution problems. And we have actually done some work in conjunction with the Resource Conservation District to try to mitigate some of the pollution problems. But as I was saying, it's a big problem that involves multiple agencies. And one of those agencies that we should be partnering with in trying to solve this complex problem is the county. Pillar Point Harbor is located in an unincorporated area. All of the runoff that comes into the harbor is coming from the unincorporated area, which the county is responsible for. None of the stormwater outfalls are being treated. That's a completely unacceptable situation. There are many different things we could be doing to treat the water before it goes into the harbor. And the RCD has proposed some solutions and I think done a couple of experiments or whatever in the past, but there's never been any sort of full-scale implementation of water treatment before it enters the harbor. And so I think that that's the direction that we really need to think about going in the future is how do we treat this water before it gets into the harbor? And working with the water board, which is a state agency, and having a workshop with them might help everyone become more informed about how this problem is widespread. In San Francisco, runoff water is treated before it enters the bay. That's how they do things in San Francisco. Here, zero treatment. There's no like bioswales or sewage treatment of stormwater or anything like that. And so all the heavy metals, all the toxins, everything that's on the streets in the industrial area of Princeton by the Sea, and also pet waste that's running off the hills of El Granada, all of that just runs right into the harbor, completely untreated, with nothing to improve the quality of that water in place. And so it's no wonder we have this chronic water quality problem. There are simple solutions to this problem, but it takes money and it takes a coordinated effort and it takes a plan. We need a plan. And so if the water board can help us help perpetuate a plan and with a call to action in their report, I think that's fantastic. But I think what we need to make sure of is that whatever the action items are coming out of their report are actually going to make meaningful change and improve the water pollution problem at Pillar Point Harbor. So because this is such a big problem and it's so complex, I would urge the district to have a workshop or some sort of meeting that's noticed that everybody can attend, including the board members, special meeting, and invite the other agencies if they're interested and to participate because we all have a stake in this, including the city of Half Moon Bay. Everybody's concerned about the water pollution at Pillar Point Harbor. We want to be able to use the harbor for multiple purposes. And some of that means human-powered vessels. People want to swim. We have triathlons where there's swimming involved. There's stand-up paddle boarding. There are all kinds of activities that require the public to submerge in the water. And so we need to make sure that water is safe.
Okay, Commissioner Brennan, thank you. I think we get your point, and I'd like to allow other commissioners the opportunity to speak as well. Commissioner Mateusz, you have your hand up. You need to unmute, Tom. Lizzie?
Yeah, I'd like
Commissioner
to,
Matushев sent you the request to unmute.
Go.
yeah, I'd like to remind everyone that the pollution sources don't originate at the harbor. We're the recipient of things further up the line. We need to develop a stronger relationship with San Mateo County because that's who's dealing directly with this. I'd like to also remind the board, as I mentioned long ago in the past, I made a presentation to the Stormwater Runoff Prevention Program, and they refused to prioritize San Mateo County Harbor District as something important in this area. They had certain sections of El Granada and different projects not related to us, but perhaps that would be something to follow up. We're not the only people made of money in this entire area. We've got to depend on other sources and funding sources. Stormwater Runoff Prevention Program has funding sources, and I'd like to see us develop a program where we could more strictly implement their direct feedback and support.
Thank you. Commissioner Lorenz?
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that we're all on board on this because it is such an important topic. I just failed to mention one thing, and that is that I do on occasion bring up the Surfrider water quality testing lab. I would like to just point out that the method that's used by Surfrider is the identical method that's used by the EPA and also by San Mateo County Environmental Health. There's no difference.
Commissioner Chen Crawley?
Thank you. I'm glad that we all care about water quality, which is something that we've been discussing for many years, and I hope that we continue to work on that. I appreciate your report and your update, Jim. I think it was probably one of the more accurate things today that we've discussed. And I also want to give a shout out to RCD, and just to let people know that we have had the pleasure of working with them for many, many years. And even though, we've had to readjust our budget to reflect at least temporarily the COVID situation and the economic downturns or, economic stresses, we continue to fund and invest in our relationship and partnership with RCD to the tune of $300,000 for the next 3 years or $100,000 a year. So I'm glad that we were able to continue that. And I really appreciate the relationship that we have with RCD. I also think it's important that we have continued relationships with, some of the community organizations like Sea Hugger. I know that they're trying to make a difference, and, we should just continue that relationship so that, maybe we can work with them as well. I mean, with the Seabin project, it seems like a small deal, but the technology is very interesting, and it's something that maybe we can leverage in the future to, as one additional mechanism to keep our marine waters clean.
That's great. Thank you. And we have just begun mitigation efforts. We spent a couple of years spending a lot of money on monitoring of water quality. And just this summer, we began our mitigation efforts. And one thing we know is that dog waste is our biggest problem, not sewage. One dog dropping has the equivalent bacteria count of 12,000 bird droppings. So we are going to be doing an educational campaign. We do try to do what we can in the surrounding communities to let other people know up pipe what's happening from us and how they, as members of the community, can help mitigate these problems. Commissioner Brennan?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that actually we've been working on mitigating these problems for many years, so this is not new. One of the things that's been pointed out is that when we hopefully do renovate Johnson Pier, we can correct a problem that we have currently, and that is wastewater is coming off of the pier untreated. And that is not an acceptable situation. There needs to be a proper drainage system installed in the pier, and that water needs to drain into the sewer system for treatment. So all of the wastewater from Johnson Pier should be treated. This is a problem that's been pointed out for years. And I know that John Morin's aware of it. And in the past, he has indicated that treatment of this wastewater would be something that would be dealt with a pier renovation. But I just want to keep it on everybody's mind that the longer we delay the renovation of the pier, the longer we delay treating this wastewater that's going directly into the harbor. Thank you.
Great. Are we ready to move on? Sounds like. So these comments on item number 7. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great, thank you. So we're moving on to commissioner comments. Item number G, commissioners may make public statements limited to 2 minutes. And Melanie, can you get the timer ready for that, please? Do we have any commissioner comments? I don't see any hands up. So H, future agenda items.
Commissioner Lorenz has his hand up.
Commissioner Lorenz, is this for H or G?
This is for commissioner comments.
And Commissioner Brennan also has her hand up.
Yeah, I saw them.
It takes a while for the electrons to move around and be seen by you guys. So you might be a little bit patient on calling for the next agenda item. So I've got just a few things. First of all, the experiment on having a meeting in the middle of the day has been done several times in the last month or so. The South San Francisco Liaison Committee meeting had maybe 2 or 3 members of the public on arguably one of the most important projects that's happening in South San Francisco, which is a development at the Marina. Having the meeting in the middle of the day excludes most of the public. We followed suit with our meeting today. Very few members of the public in attendance. And then when we had our meeting for the renovation of Surfers Beach bathrooms, or the parking lot down there, we had the meeting not at 1, but we had it during commute time. And again, we had, I think, maybe 3 people on what is one of the most important projects that we have before us with respect to the public. So I'd like to recommend that we go back to the original time for the regular meeting and show some respect for the working class public that can't show up at these early meetings. I'd like to also just make the point that items that are important for the public should not be on the consent agenda. We just had several minutes of discussion of Regional Water Quality Control Board report as an example. And Commissioner Reiring, I would urge you to please stop with your editorial comments. You're abusing the control of the Zoom platform, and it is conduct unbecoming of a commissioner. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Brennan?
Thank you for that delayed unmuting. I have comments for both of these agenda items, for commissioner comments, and then also for future agenda items. So I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to do both. First of all, I just wanted to follow up on what Commissioner Lorena said and remind everybody that the Half Moon Bay Review wrote an article, and in that story, they said that the San Mateo County Harbor District is the only special district, and there are no city councils as well who conduct meetings during the workday. There is one special district in this county that I'm aware of that has a semi-daytime meeting. I believe that meeting starts at 4:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30, and that's the Sequoia Healthcare District. Not a single other agency outside of the Board of Supervisors in our county is conducting meetings when the public is at work and when commissioners are at work as well. I have a job, I run a business. It's very difficult for me to attend a daytime meeting. Now, I'm leaving the board at the end of December, so maybe it doesn't matter to all of you, but I think that it's pretty absurd to expect that the public be able to attend a 1 p.m. meeting. And I'm not going to go into all the details I went into last time about how outrageous I think this decision was, but I would like to request that we put this on the agenda for our next regular meeting to discuss meeting time and to consider moving our meeting time back to 6:30 p.m. when the public is able to attend and when people that are commissioners, we don't know who the commissioners are going to be next year. There may be some new ones, there may not, so that those commissioners have an opportunity to attend the meeting without conflicting with their day job. So one other item that I'd like to request for agenda item. And so in addition to the item of meeting time, I'd also like to request that we have an Oyster Point development presentation so that the public can become aware of the future project that's going to be developed at Oyster Point and be able to ask questions of the developer. I would expect it would be a very friendly discussion, just an opportunity for everybody to broaden their awareness about what the future at Oyster Point is. So those are my two requests for agenda items.
Commissioner Mateusz, you have your hand raised.
I just want to say that I went over to Oyster Point to look at the progress. There's still a lot of dirt turned over. I think it's going to be a long time before we can get into actually seeing visitor serving things. The road's being worked on. It's near completion of driving through Oyster Point. There's a lot of things going on, but right now that's just a massive construction site. As far as something beneficial, I want to talk about Dungeness crab season. On recent bird watching trips, the majority of the whales and blue whales, humpbacks and blue whales, were out on the shelf, which is good news for crabbers. The shelf means about where we're dropping off from 600 feet going down to several thousand. The further away the whales are, the better a chance we've got of seeing our commercial and recreational crab season open on time. There was a tagged leatherback sea turtle that was heading towards Half Moon Bay. He's changed courses and he's progressing back out to open ocean. So those are all beneficial for things that are coming up regarding the Harbor District in the very near future.
Thank you. All right, well, lost a little bit track of where we are. I think we've addressed commissioner comments and future agenda items. We have September activity reports, information only, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
President Reiring, before we move to the adjourn, if I can, one point was Commissioner Brennan did ask for 2 items to be placed on future agendas, and there was no follow-up to that.
I didn't hear a motion or a second. Commissioner Chan-Crowley?
Well, I was going to move to adjourn, but if we're still on the future agenda items, we should address those.
The first agenda item she requested was to move the meeting back to 6:30. The second was requesting that the board receive a presentation on oyster development.
So we need a motion and a second on those. Commissioner Brennan or Lorenz? Why don't you two go right ahead in whatever order you like.
This is another example of how ridiculous it is to have us muted. So I would have seconded, but I was muted. So I'd like to second both of Commissioner Brennan's motions.
All right. Well, she did not actually make a motion. She just requested some things. So would you like to make the motion?
I'll let Sabrina Brennan do that.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yes, I would have made a motion if I had not been muted. So it's not fair to say there hasn't been a motion made when I'm not called on to make the motion. This is a bit of a circus here.
You know, the way it works. I think you know how to make a motion at this point. Go ahead and make the motion.
Because I thought that was what we were here to do. So I would like to make a motion that we consider meeting time at our next regular board meeting, that we consider moving our meeting time to evening meetings. So I move that we reconsider our meeting time for our regular meetings at our next board meeting.
I second that.
Melanie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodring?
No.
Commissioner Chang Crawley?
No.
Commissioner Mateusz?
No.
Okay, I will make my next motion, which is to have a presentation about, I guess I should say, a presentation from Oyster Point Development, similar to the presentation that was received by the Oyster Point Liaison Committee at our next regular board meeting.
I'll second.
Roll call, Melanie.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Oh, wait, can we have a quick discussion? I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
That meeting has been taped and it's on YouTube. So, and I think that you have the date. So I think, Ed, didn't you mention the date, or someone mentioned the date of August 2017, I think. So just for the public's benefit, that meeting is like all the other meetings for the liaison committee meetings. Those are on YouTube.
That would be a great preface to having an actual meeting so the public can ask questions. Thank you.
So the point of the motion is to provide the public an opportunity.
I understand. I was discussing it before we did the vote. That's all. I just wanted to remind everyone that these are on videotape.
Yeah, it would allow people to be informed when they go to a meeting.
If there's no more discussion, Melanie, roll call.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodring?
No.
Commissioner Chang Crawley?
No.
Commissioner Mateusz?
No.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All right. Roll call, Melanie.
Commissioner Rodring?
Aye.
Commissioner Chang Crawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. See you next time.